Okay, so good evening. Obviously, the Super Bowl took place this weekend in Los Angeles. The Rams beating the Bengals, so the Bengals still do not have a Super Bowl to their name. Um, Quite a bit is going on. If you follow the NHL, Martin St. Louis has now been installed as interim coach of the Montreal Canadiens, who are having a pretty shocking season, and a lot of their good players are now on the trade block. So the Montreal Canadiens going from Stanley Cup finalists to the worst team in the league was not expected at the start of the season, and the Carey Price situation. So that's something. Obviously, the NRL has had the All Star weekend, where the Maori and Indigenous All Stars in both the men's and women's games had their one-off season openers. So this weekend, the pre-season trials matches begin in the NRL. So we'll get to see some of the young talent get a run out, and we'll still see some player movement, obviously. So that's something to look forward to. Is that the NRL is slowly gearing up, and it's just over 5.5 weeks until the start of the NRL season. So I will be doing at some point an NRL preview video, probably at the weekend. We'll have a look into doing a preview video for the NRL 2022 season. I'm going to do it in one video rather than each individual club, just to save time. But it's looking like a very interesting season ahead. They haven't done too many rule changes this off-season. They've only tweaked the six again rule. So if you give away a penalty in the 20-metre zone, six again, it becomes a penalty. I think that was a pretty good decision by the NRL head office to come up with that rule change. No new rules have been tweaked, so that's good. So they've allowed the current rule set to bed in. There's been a lot of criticism of the amount of rule changes in the last two seasons with the NRL, so that's kind of nice that they've decided not to continually add and tweak rules, which would be, I think, beneficial. Looking forward to the season. A lot of young up and coming talent coming through. Obviously, some talent's obviously gone over to the Super League, so there's some new halves combinations, new players coming in. Some players have retired, and of course we've got the Rugby League World Cup at the end of the year, a year late. I'll do a video on that. And was it the right decision to delay the Rugby League World Cup by a year? I think it was. Looking in hindsight at what happened this winter with the COVID pandemic and everything, the way it was handled initially, I don't think was the right way. Good evening, Dan. Nice to see you again. Yeah, the weather's been horrible here as well. Understanding there's been a fair bit of snow in the eastern seaboard, northeast corridor of the US and Canada. The last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of rain and strong winds and a bit of flooding and power outages over here in the UK in various bits. So it's not been great. Piers Morgan, what's Piers Morgan said now? Piers Morgan says a lot of crap. Basically, I'm not a fan of Piers Morgan, to be brutally honest. Um, this is going back to his time as a tabloid journalist all the way through till now. I'm not a fan of Piers Morgan. I don't know what he said about David Beckham this time. Personally, I think he's what I call gutter journalism from Piers Morgan. Um, what David Beckham's done for soccer, and I will call it soccer because you're an American viewer in the US, is amazing. How he's helped basically develop the MLS brand and help grow the sport in the US and Canada since he joined LA Galaxy. The fact he set up his own team. I mean, yeah, the team isn't great. It's an expansion team. You don't expect expansion teams in North American sports to do great off the bat. But what he's done if you were to give a lifetime achievement award, I would definitely have him as a builder if you were to have a Hall of Fame. Um, Whatever Piers Morgan says, I don't take too seriously. I'm going to see what he's actually said, just so I can actually build an opinion on what Piers Morgan has said there, to be honest. But Piers Morgan, he did an interview series where he would interview famous people over here in the UK, and he had some sports stars up, and he wrote some articles when he was working for the Daily Mirror, which is a British newspaper, British tabloid. And yeah, basically, at the end of the day, he's gone from a left-wing tabloid to a right-wing tabloid, which I find quite hilarious. Let's have a look, see what he actually said on about David Beckham. Morgan tweeted, "Great to watch Beckham, who can actually play football. Super Bowl." Morgan replied, "You might want to suck it up to him for whatever reason, but Beckham was the most overrated player in history. Wouldn't have gone to the Arsenal's Invincibles bench. He still won more trophies than the Arsenal's Invincibles." He's talking about Odell Beckham Jr. obviously, and comparing David Beckham to Odell Beckham Jr. Basically, Piers Morgan is an Arsenal tragic. Um, it means he's a hardcore Arsenal fan. David Beckham, obviously, with the Man United Arsenal rivalry under Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson back in the 90s and the 2000s, was a very heated rivalry in English football. They were the two most successful sides at the time, going head to head. Some of their matches were classics for the ages, not necessarily graced with most skill sometimes. Sometimes they're very physical encounters, lots of penalties, free kicks, yellow cards, red cards, lots of controversy. Um, I don't really care what Piers Morgan says. He's allowed to have his opinion, but he's worked for some pretty grotty tabloid newspapers and magazines, and he's written some pretty shoddy articles on high profile people and sports stars and yeah, quite honestly, my thoughts on it is yeah, he's allowed his opinion. I'm not allowed to. I'm also allowed not to agree with it. I think David Beckham, for what he's done for the game, and how he's helped build the game and his brand, David Beckham was one of those few, well, I'm going to say football players. Obviously, you call him a soccer player, that Americans knew who he was. Partly because of his wife, who's obviously Victoria Beckham, part of the Spice Girls, and they were very big in the US in the mid '90s. They were a global brand as a girl band, pop band, but also for what he did on the field. And he was England captain for many years. He uh, may not have been the most skilled player ever. I would agree with that. He wasn't necessarily the most skilled player ever, but you look at his trophy cabinet and look at the teams he's played for and the managers and players he's played for and played with, um, and what he's done in the game. Dead ball specialist. Some of the clutch goals. He wasn't an outstanding goal scorer. He didn't have much pace in midfield, but some of the ability he had, and his work ethic. Yeah, there's been a bit of controversy with David Beckham as well off the field and things like that. But what he's done for the game, and especially growing the game and the sport as a whole in the US and Canada, cannot be understated. Um, he's done a lot of good for the sport. He's been a goodwill ambassador for the UN. He's obviously now you know got Inter Miami, and whether you can say Inter Miami is going to be a success long term or not, that's a different question. That's a different topic. But he's willing to help continue to grow the sport in a non-traditional market. Um, so yeah, Gareth Bale, Mo Salah, or Neymar all in their prime. Neymar's overrated in my opinion, and the transfer for Neymar was ridiculous and has completely overinflated the transfer market. He's missed nearly 40 to 50, but I think it's about 45% of the games he could have played, he's missed through injury, suspension, or other reasons, disciplinary reasons. Um, you know, eh, he's playing in a league that's less competitive than some of the other European leagues. Gareth Bale, his attitude sucks. I would have Mo Salah because of his attitude, his work rate, and his teamwork. Gareth Bale, his time at Real Madrid, there have been huge question marks over his commitment, his attitude, his teamwork, his training. And it looks like he's going to be leaving Real Madrid in the summer, whether he retires or goes elsewhere to finish his career. He's been heavily criticised for not even attempting to learn basic Spanish. Um, but for me, Mo Salah simply because of the way he's very very humble compared to the other two. During the Africa Cup of Nations, you listen to his interviews, and he was coming across like even like Sadio Mane, exceptionally humble, very down to earth. Um, he's he works hard. You look at the energy and the effort he puts in a Liverpool shirt and an Egypt shirt. You look at him track back. You look at him work hard for the team, work hard with his teammates. Um, he lifts the teammates around him by his performance. Um, and he comes across as a very humble individual. And he's a very consistent player. Gareth Bale and Neymar aren't consistent enough. When they want to throw a strop, you know, it does affect the dressing room dynamic. It does affect, the team chemistry. Gareth Bale, his second stint at Tottenham was a disaster. While Gareth Bale has been part of a very good Real Madrid side when he was there, winning Champions League and La Liga titles and Copa del Rey's. Question marks about his attitude, his commitment. He spent more time on the golf course at times. So for me, it's Mo Salah. It's not just how skillful an individual player is; it's their work rate. It's what they're like as a teammate, what they're like in the dressing room, out away from the playing field, off the field, behind the scenes, and in working in the community, engaging with the community. For me, Mo Salah, I think, is far and ahead. You would want a Mo Salah in your side because he's a team player. The other two are more individual players who don't necessarily play like team players and don't necessarily benefit the team. There's a lot of distractions with the other two that I think hamper, team chemistry and they're also not very likable either. I find Gareth Bale's the same age as me. I don't find Gareth Bale a very likable individual. If I'm going to work in a country where I've got to try and learn a new language, I would at least try. If it's not working and you're not feeling happy there, then obviously move on. Neymar, that transfer ridiculous. It's completely distorted football economics, utterly. And well, yeah, his histrionics, his diving, his rolling around. Gareth Bale's quite guilty of that as well. To be fair, Mo Salah's had a few dives in his career also. That's a problem across the men's game. You don't see it in the women's game as much. Um, But no, if you're asking me who I'm taking, I'm taking Mo Salah because I don't think Mo Salah's peaked yet. I think in a couple of years, I think he's going to be at his best. I think Mo Salah's still got more development in himself. Neymar's too much drama with Neymar. Um, too much baggage with Neymar. Same with Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale on his day is brilliant. There's no doubt about it. But the problem with Gareth Bale, in a defensive standpoint, he's useless at tracking back. He started off as a left back and was hopeless. So there you go. They very quickly realised the wing back or winger position was better, and then he evolved. But defensively, suspect. Neymar as well. Whereas Mo Salah actually does try and bust a gut with the press to get back and assist midfielders and his defenders in winning the ball back and working more as a team player. But I'm not even a Liverpool fan. Um, there you go. And also, ironically, he's one of those players that Chelsea let go. Colour combination sports, mine's black and red. The AC Milan look is quite a nice look. I'm not going to lie on that one. We don't have the black and red so much in English football, apart from Bournemouth as a home kit. Um, Black and red. It's not the most common colour combination, although Man City for a while had that as their away kit historically in the 90s, famously worn by George Weah, now current president of Liberia. Black and red, though, it's one of them. I would say it's a rarer colour scheme. I'm more of a blue and white kind of blue, white, and red kind of guy. Partly because the club I support, but yeah, but everyone's got their personal opinion on that and what they like and dislike, and in my opinion, that's fair comment. You can say yours is black and red. I mean, I like blue and white with a bit of red trim. Um, I like blue and marigold is quite good as well. Sky blue and a light marigold is quite an interesting colour scheme. So the Gold Coast Titans, for example, more of a turquoisey kind of ocean, tropical blue with a bit of marigold. If you watch the rugby league, that's quite a good colour combination. I like that. Some people don't like the marigold, and that's fine. It can be a bit garish. I like greens in sports kits as well. Don't know why. I like greens and blues. I like those kind of calming colours. I find red very aggressive colour, and I don't really enjoy it. And it's been proven that blue actually is a very calming colour, and green's quite a calming colour. Studies have shown that. But no, that's Uh, fair enough, I suppose. I remember my school house colours. I had two different school houses when I was at school. My first set was gold, gold and black, which is like Vegas, but it's not so garish. Like custody gold and black. And my second set were dark navy blue and white hoops. So there you go. The Minnesota Wild green is quite a nice green, but I think they need to change the logo and maybe need to change up some of the amount of red and maybe change their jerseys and their logo a little bit. But um, uh, there is that. You don't see much green in football. You've got Forest Green Rovers, Yeovil Town, Celtic, Real Betis, and for the moment Sassuolo in Italian football. Although from next season they have to drop green as their primary colour. They can still have green on their kit, but it has to be dropped as a primary colour. That's new Serie A rules to do with the TV deal because TV companies are stupid and think green clashes with the pitch, even though it's not the same colour as grass. You couldn't make that up, so they're bringing in a ban on green as a primary colour, which I think is ridiculous. So Sassuolo have to change their club history to suit TV companies. That's one of the things I don't like about current media rights is they call a lot of the tune when it comes to um, um, bits and pieces. Yeah, Sporting Lisbon, another one. Yeah, but there's not Northwich Victoria. If you follow the non-league, they play in green. But there's not a lot of green in sport apart from Ireland as a national side and some of the Australian kits you see and Pakistan in cricket. You don't see a lot of green. Which is a shame. Slovenia playing in green occasionally at international level, but yeah, you don't see a lot of green. I find that a bit odd, if I'm being honest, that you don't see much green. Norwich have a bit of green in their kit, but it's primarily canary yellow, um, like a custody yellow. But yeah, that's a fair point. You don't see a lot of yeah. Norwich have a bit of green and yellow. It's got a bit of green trim, green shorts, yellow shirts, bit of green. It's a greeny yellow. It's like a mustard colour, which is where Coleman's mustard, the brand, come from. Yeah, Sassuolo, they can still have green in their kit and in their crest, but it has to be on the trim. It can't be the main colour, which I find a bit unfair on them because that's their club history, that's their culture. Yeah, Green Bay Packers, they play in green. That is true. Dallas Stars, primarily green as well, and their neon kit this year is just one of those kits that you just don't like. That jersey's hideous, but it will be a cult classic in years to come. I have no doubt on the 1980s neon green disco kit, as it's called, will be a cult collectible classic. I can't see the Dallas Stars keeping that hideous, hideous green kit much longer. Any team from Seattle has that kind of ocean green, like the Seahawks and things like that. But yeah, green's not a very common sporting colour. Yeah, no, true. Obviously, we had the Six Nations, the second round of the Six Nations, and France is now the only team left that can win the Grand Slam. They're my favourites for the tournament. Ireland are still my second favourites because in attack they also looked pretty good. It was a seesaw game and it literally came down to a period of about 22, 23 minutes in the first half where France just kept the scoreboard ticking over. England's second half performance against Italy was poor. Um, and there's no doubt about England's performance second half was not good enough. Lack of intensity, a lot of silly errors. They tried just allowed in the first half for again giving a silly obstruction penalty, which you just can't do at that level. Um, Italy showed a lot of fight and a lot of character in their losing performance. Scotland, Wales, Scotland's so Jekyll and Hyde. Scotland have got problems of consistency. Wales are just grinding their way through. They're I think Wales last year's performance has papered over a lot of cracks with Wayne Pivac. That period with Wayne Pivac, there's still question marks over whether he's the right guy to take the team forward. Because the first 18 months of him in charge was not great. His record was poor. Then he turned it around a little bit, and it's back to where you were really with Wales. And Welsh rugby fans, I have a long running battle with Welsh rugby fans. Um, and I, it's a weird one. The Six Nations. Brief description of what the Six Nations is. How do they choose the six? Originally, it was the four home nations of the UK. So before Ireland, the Republic, became an independent country in 1921, it was England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, United Ireland, and that's why Northern Ireland and the Republic play as one international team in rugby league and rugby union. France joined before World War One, and then Italy joined 22 years ago. Basically, you have to be invited in, um, and that's basically it. It's basically the four home nations plus the two best European continental nations. That's it. There were calls to get Georgia and Romania into the competition, but they've never beaten Italy. So, and if you want to have that promotion relegation argument, in some years past, Scotland, France, Wales, and Ireland would have also been technically relegated out. So you can't have that. That's why that relegation argument disappears when some of the bigger nations are struggling. The more established nations are struggling. Um, but Italy's youth system is working quite well. And the Italian women's team is actually quite good. So I can't see them dropping out of Six Nations anytime soon. It's the most historic rugby competition in the world. It's got the oldest international in the world with England and Scotland. Um, the oldest rivalry in sport. Um, and it's sort of like the Southern Hemisphere equivalent of the Rugby Championship. Originally, you had Australia and New Zealand um, just toured around the world for 12 months basically, and had the Bledisloe Cup between them. And then South Africa ended apartheid in '95, so they were allowed to join the Rugby Championship. And then Argentina joined about a decade ago. Again, they were banging on the door for years, and then Sanazar, as it's now known as that grouping, the Sanazar nations, the four big Southern Hemisphere nations, made from tri-nations to the Rugby Championship. There's calls to get Japan in there and Fiji in there, because and possibly Tonga. Samoa's basically bankrupt. That wouldn't work. There are calls though to expand the rugby championship to like a Southern and Pacific kind of Six Nations. You've got the America's Rugby Championship, which was suspended because of COVID, which has helped the US and Canadian teams and Uruguay massively. Even Brazil play rugby union to a decent level, and Chile. And Chile and the US have a playoff in the next couple of weeks to decide which one of them over a two-legged playoff goes to the World Cup. And if the US miss out, that's going to be a massive blow because they've made massive strides with Major League Rugby and going up the world rankings. But they got beaten in a two-leg playoff against Uruguay handsomely, I think. I think we'll find actually look at the balance of play. Convincingly outplayed. Canada haven't qualified for the World Cup for the first time, and Indian rugby's in a mess. So there's question marks over, should they have a second major league rugby team like in Vancouver or Edmonton or Calgary, or another one on the eastern seaboard in like Halifax or somewhere like that. And they need to completely rebuild themselves. So the Canadian Rugby Union's been a mess for like the last 5-6 years, completely declined. They're now not the best team in the Americas. Outside of Argentina, Uruguay is the second best team in North and South America by some margin. The US, Chile get into that World Cup, that's massive for them. So yeah, the two big, uh, North American rugby union countries are not doing so well, and there'll be huge question marks over the US if they fail to make the World Cup. They have to beat Chile, and Chile have beaten them in recent years, so it won't be an easy match for them. Match up. They've got two games. It'll be fun to watch though. Well, let's keep politics off the channel, please. Yes, we can discuss like the arena capacity issues for stadiums and arenas in Canada at the moment. We can discuss that, but let's keep politics off the channel. Um, uh, yes, I think the Rugby World Cup will be expanded. They've expanded the Rugby League World Cup a couple of times. Obviously, the Football World Cup and the Euros have been expanded, so I can see that happening. But they've expanded the Rugby World Cup before as well, so it'll be interesting if they do. But player welfare is an issue because the turnaround between games. Smaller nations have complained for years. Their turnaround is shorter. They have less player depth. Um, and you have to balance the pros and the cons of obviously getting a bigger product, a better product to sell, by balancing that with player welfare and making it fair for every nation to at least have a fair group stage, and make it fair for player welfare, basically. And while, yes, an expanded World Cup would be brilliant, the structure of the format would be altered somewhat. But yes, it's the second biggest non-Olympic tournament, sporting wise, national international tournament in the world after the Football World Cup. Maybe the Euros might pip it, So for viewership, so it's a massive global brand. Um, and so yeah, but they've expanded the Rugby League World Cup in recent years as well. New nations are qualifying for that, which is obviously great to see. Um, obviously, new nations qualifying for that in Greece and Jamaica. So uh, the Rugby League World Cup's got to be a success this year. Has to be a success this year. If rugby league is to be taken seriously and it's to bounce back in the Super League kind of clubs to bounce back with expansion coming in the NRL and obviously further expansion in a couple of years' time, no doubt they need to have an even team league. I can definitely see rugby league, if this World Cup is a bit of a flop, it taking a hit because it's trying to grow its global reach as well, and improve the game globally. And so it'll be interesting to see. I'll do a video on the decision to delay the Rugby League World Cup. I mean, look, I would have loved to have watched it this autumn just gone. It would have been a brilliant thing to watch. Hasn't been the case. Got to wait until October this year. And then after that finishes, within a week or so, we've got the Football World Cup. So we've got two World Cups basically back to back, two World Cups back to back, which is going to be mental for the channel. Um, and hopefully will massively help the channel grow and all that. So that's something to look forward to at the end of the year. I mean, the NRL season is about to start in a couple of weeks. The pre-season trial games are going to start. We see a lot of the new young talent, get a run out. Some of them might make the final squads for the season. So there's that to bear in mind. But yeah, I could definitely see the Rugby World Cup being expanded. Also, it has been noted. I read an article today about the proposal to change the World Cup cycle to every 2 years. 75% of players polled are against it. 75% of players. If you can't get the players on board, then it's not going to be a spectacle. We saw with the European Super League, the players weren't on board alongside the fans. I don't think FIFA's quite really read the room. Because again, we're discussing player welfare. What we've seen with the amount of players having health issues, collapsing on the pitch, and all that, the Christian Eriksen, Sergio Aguero, and others, is that there's definitely a player welfare argument against uh, making it a 2 year cycle. Even the African players, a majority are still against, and that's where the strongest support is for changing the World Cup cycle to every 2 years. Um, you know, that I can't see it working, especially as we've got this World Cup in Qatar, and then we've got the next World Cup in the US, Canada, and Mexico. They've already been penciled in, and then you've got the World Cup bid for 2030. I can't see it working. They haven't got a long-term plan. But okay, we're going to put it in. So they're 2 years' time, we find out if it actually gets ratified. Infantino is, driving it. And so we'll see what happens with the Football World Cup. And of course, that's expanding as well. So again, a player welfare issue. How are you going to fit with a growing tournament? How are you going to fit all these games in? How are you going to, give the players enough time off outside of qualifications and the Euros? No, of course it would devalue it. It would also, I mean, that's one no one really cares about the African Cup of Nations. I have to admit, a few games I watched, there's only one or two good games in the African Cup of Nations this year. The quality was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. It was terrible. The quality, really poor. Um, but yeah, it would devalue the product massively. Um, Massively. We could argue about allowing more African teams to qualify for the World Cup. That might mitigate calling for a 2 year. Um, so there's that. What do I know about the Lacrosse World Championship? Not a lot. We have discussed the origins of lacrosse on this channel. We have discussed the Major League Lacrosse League, which is basically a semi-pro league at best in the US and Canada. Um, Ireland itself, hurling and Gaelic football are amateur sports. Rugby union is professional, and what we call football is professional. And on the island of Ireland, there's only one professional ice hockey team. And you've got a couple of professional Irish motor racing and motorcycle riders and motor racing drivers, and some high-profile athletes, some AFL players. Ireland itself is very interesting. You've got Catholics and Protestants. There's a lot of politics and political tension. There's been a lot, you know, it's an interesting place, very interesting place. The people are very laid back, from what I found. They're very passionate about their national sides. The history of Ireland is exceptionally complex, exceptionally complex. If you want to work with Irish sport, you have to understand that rugby union football, for some, is seen as a garrison sport, a British sport, whereas amateur association sports like lacrosse are not like hurling, sorry, and Gaelic football are seen as the traditional Irish sports. So there is a bit of division in Irish society in certain aspects. The rural areas will play the amateur association sports, the Gaelic amateur. Um, uh, Gaelic Amateur Association. The bigger towns, you'll find European Association football and rugby union played professionally, um, and at semi-pro. There's even cricket as well. Ireland, for a small nation, develops a lot of really good athletes. It really does. Look at the rugby union side, for example, and some of the football players who've come out of Ireland over the last 30 years who've gone on to play across the leagues in Europe and in the US. Um, the thing is, with Irish sport, there's not a lot of money in it. That's the major problem because the population is so small. Their best talent at some point will be playing overseas to get paid, basically. The answer, but Ireland itself, you've got to do your research. I mean, the history of Ireland and the US and Canada is importantly linked, especially on the East Coast, places like Boston, New York, Toronto, uh, Philadelphia, the northeast corridor of the US and Nova Scotia and parts of Ontario, big Irish communities, uh, very strong links between Ireland and the northeast of the US and then the east coast of Canada. Really, that's a big thing. Um, but Ireland as a nation, sporting nation, it's amazing some of the talent that they've produced over the years. Quality, high level talent. Um, yes, but Ireland. There's a lot in between the Irish potato famine and the First World War. There was a huge wave of immigration from Ireland to Canada and the US and to Australia as well and New Zealand. A huge wave to other Commonwealth nations and the US especially. Huge millions left, millions. There's more people of Irish descent in the US than in Ireland itself. There's more people of Irish descent in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Toronto than in the whole of Ireland. So, speaking to that, work out what you will out of that. Um, but they're still producing great sporting talent in both Belfast, which is Northern Ireland, and Dublin, which is the Republic. The amount of sporting talent that's come out of the north and south of Ireland is ridiculous for the population size, absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it is also it's a shame that Major League Lacrosse has just got hardly any following. You know, it could be a sport if marketed correctly and getting the right sponsorship and the right TV deal could actually, quite honestly, do rather well. Um, However, it's got to compete against the more established sports and those sports that have a big global footprint, like rugby union and association football, which globally have got a massive following. And that is the problem lacrosse is facing. Is It's a very niche sport, and it's one of the few sports that hasn't got European origins. It's got Native American origins. So automatically, it's at a disadvantage over those sports that have European origins, and you're already on the back foot then with that. But I mean, even people who care don't follow them. It's ridiculous. So that's already putting Major League Baseball. As far as I'm aware, they're still in lockdown. I've seen nothing on social media. I've seen absolutely nothing on social media about a break in the deadlock. Um, from what I read, another proposal put forward by the league has been rejected by the Players Association. And I fear that the longer this goes on, I mean, the time is ticking because, the training camps were meant to have started and we're meant to be having those pre-season matches. So already the league will be losing money. Owners will be losing money. Then you have to factor that in with the fact that the MLS will be starting to play games, get their season up and running. You've got the NBA and NHL in the tail end of their season when their viewership actually goes up before they go into the playoff, run into the playoffs. And obviously the NFL's done now. So the NFL's done. So those NFL fans will be watching, the other leagues in those markets. So you're looking at the NBA, you're looking at the NHL, and so Major League Baseball is playing a very dangerous game with its fan base, its customer base. Basically, it's gonna the longer this goes on, it will damage the brand of Major League Baseball quite badly, and I'm seeing so many parallels with the NHL lockout 2004 and 2005, which I still believe the NHL is still not fully recovered from itself. But this lockout with Major League Baseball does raise questions about the Toronto Blue Jays' future. I mean, Toronto will support anything. We know that. Toronto will support absolutely anything. Um, in fact, you could probably have two teams in every sport in Toronto. It's that big a metropolitan area with that much, disposable income. The issue is the last time we had a labour stoppage in Major League Baseball, the Montreal Expos, within less than a decade, moved. And there were some economic things to do with that, with the Canadian dollar and the Canadian economy at the time and not being in a strong position. However, um, they ultimately moved to Washington, D.C., which could happen to the Blue Jays. Where would you move the Blue Jays? That's up to the ownership of the teams. But until we see a break in ranks with either the playing group, the Players Association, or the team owners, which at the moment doesn't seem likely, we're not going to see any kind of move towards compromising. Um, but Toronto itself will support anything. They will support anything. That's a fact. Whether the team is successful or not, they will turn up and watch. Um, it's a sports mad city. It's the biggest market in Canada. I think it's like the third biggest market in the US and Canada, maybe the fourth um, for the metropolitan area. So it's one of the biggest sports markets, not only in North America but also in the northern hemisphere. It's one of the it's it. So Toronto has a stronger economic base than Montreal, but Major League Baseball is playing a very dangerous game. Very, very dangerous game with itself because yes, it could lose fans who may permanently switch off, and with the economy as it is globally, money's tight, and fans will be voting with their wallets. They'll be like, I can't afford to go to a baseball game. I don't want to renew my subscription for the Major League Baseball app or Major League Baseball streaming services or cable TV. I can't afford to buy merchandise this year. That kind of thing. Um, so the longer this goes on, the harder it is for them to recoup the losses they're going to make. Um, and it does put them at a disadvantage when the other leagues, even with reduced capacities in certain locations, and escrow and salary retention just to get through the last couple of years, are making smaller losses. And the NHL's obviously had the expansion fees of Seattle and Vegas over the last 5 years to boost its coffers. Um, yeah, that is, and Major League Soccer's had Inter Miami, and I think Nashville joined, so they've had expansion fees. Major League Rugby's had expansion fees. So these other leagues, be it smaller or bigger or the same size, um, have got money coming in. They've mitigated the losses, or they've actually even made profits in some locations, or whatever. Baseball is playing a very, very dangerous game, and Then the question mark will be: will the league want to keep Manfred as commissioner? Will there be a change in the administration of the league? Will there be changes in front office? Um, will other teams be forced to move? Will the league have to contract? There's all these questions that need answering, and unfortunately, the position is not good for the league. No matter what statements are put out saying this is the right decision for the league, because in the days leading up, they were signing big contracts with free agents. There were trades happening and the contract extensions, big money being thrown around. Um, so yeah, the economics of Major League Baseball make no sense. It is the only league with no salary cap in North America, which I find bizarre in this day and age. That every other league has gone down that route, and guess what? The player salaries have never been higher across the board. Even the base salary for league minimum is the highest it's ever been. Even with salary retention and escrow, the the lowest paid players are better off now than before in real terms before the salary caps were brought in. So um, I don't know enough about the Major League Baseball commissioner's position and the history of it. I've really got to look into the history of the commissioners, but they've had a lot of commissioner changes. Um, the way the league handled the Astros sign stealing scandal, I think, was pretty bad. I did a video on that at the time, and I was very critical of the punishments dished out to the Astros. The fact they're allowed to keep their World Series title, the fact that no players were suspended in the aftermath. Um, Only the coach and the general manager got sacked. The fine itself was a drop in the ocean for the owner. Um, the way they still haven't fully recovered from the steroid scandal. Now, I'm old enough to remember when that all broke, and I'm not a baseball fan, but it made news over here in the UK. Baseball is not the biggest followed of the North American. It's not the most popular of the North American sports leagues. Over here, it's the NBA, the NFL, and the NHL have far more fans that I know of than Major League Baseball. Um, and the league is still recovering, in my opinion, from the fallout from that. Look, in my opinion, I don't think they're the only team doing it. We know the Red Sox were doing it as well to a lesser extent. They're not the only team that's tried to cheat in that way. I'm not naive to think that. I said that in the video a couple. If you look at my Major League Baseball playlist, I do actually cover the Astros scandal and why I felt, even though I'm not a baseball fan, I even hold my hand up to say that. Why I felt that regardless, if that was an NHL scandal, I'd be exactly as pissed. The way the league handled it, the statements given out by the league head office, the weak punishments, I compared it to other cheating scandals and salary cap, you know, doping scandals, things like that, where you are either financially doping, much doping your players. Punishments dished out to those teams that were caught out were so severe that you know titles were stripped, fines were dished out, people were suspended from playing or coaching and being administrators for lengthy periods, massive fines, you know, points stripped, the whole lot. Deflategate, yeah, well, obviously that was the Patriots, and then of course they are a license to print money with the Kraft family who owned them. But yeah, Deflategate got news over here as well. The obsession with some of the North American leagues, though, in Europe is a bit of a head scratcher. I know, and the NFL obviously has really pushed their London series, and that's why I was again surprised that Major League Baseball was so late in the uptake of taking um, games to London. In regards to the NFL, the NHL has played games in the Belfast, which is the biggest ice arena that we have in the UK, is the Belfast SSE Arena. But the Belfast Giants, who are one of the best teams in the UK, played the Boston Bruins in 2007 in a pre-season exhibition game. Which, to be fair, um, Belfast had obviously started their regular season. They only lost 5-1, and this is years ago when the Elite League wasn't at the standard it is now. Um, the NBA taking games to the O2, which is the former Millennium Dome. The NHL taking games across Europe. The NFL London series. Major League Baseball taking until 2019 to finally play games. Wasn't great. It sucked watching in the moment, being so into these playoffs, understanding how well the teams are hitting against such talented pitching, and find out their biggest advantage possible. I think the juicing of the ball, I think, was far more damaging than the sign stealing. But yeah, when you've got inside knowledge on your opposition, that's against the rules, rather than just scouting your opposition like most sports do. Going, this player likes doing this, at this time of the game. This player has a weakness on his left hand side, so try and get him that way. This player doesn't like a left hand pitcher. That's different when you're actually deliberately looking at their calls and technically like videotape gate with the Patriots as well, when you're actually going against what the rules state rather than just scouting individual players, going, right, this player likes the ball being pitched a bit further out, so therefore he prefers it there. He doesn't like a left-handed pitcher, or he prefers batting against a lefty. That's different. The Russian skater, the excuses they come up with when they're caught are getting more and more like a Monty Python sketch. I do not believe for 1 second, because, oh, well, I'm going to take my grandfather's Viagra medication, because that's pretty much, she's taking his heart pills basically to control the heart rate, control your breathing. That's basically what she's done. Same thing. Some of the excuses they come out with, how the IOC can buy that. No, she should be banned, even though it's not technically her fault. It's her trainers and coaches who are deliberately doping her. It should be banned. Personally, I think it's a joke. It's a cop out. Yeah, she's only 15, and then there should be question marks about how young Olympic athletes should be before they're allowed, how old athletes should be before they're allowed to compete at senior level. Because we've seen coaches abuse their position in various ways with their athletes over many years, and that raises question marks about, again, athlete welfare. I don't think she was even aware what they were pumping into her, because she's so young, in my opinion. And they've probably been doing it for several years. Female athletes have a lower heart and breathing rate than male athletes. They can control their breathing better anyway. And if you give them substances to control it further, you can increase your oxygen uptake in your bloodstream. Um, the reason why is the Irish connection between Boston and Ireland is one of the reasons why they decided to take it over to Belfast all those years ago. Um, I believe the NHL will take more pre-season games when the pandemic allows. When things have really calmed down in a couple of years, the NHL will go back to going around the European leagues. They might even do a whole pre-season in Europe. I'm also surprised, but bear in mind, Belfast is the most consistent team for so long. They've got the biggest arena, so it makes sense to try and get the biggest arena with the biggest revenue possible. That's just how the economics works. That was the agreement in 2007. At some point in the future, we we may see a Sheffield or a Nottingham or a Cardiff or a Glasgow or wherever it may be, Guildford. They may decide, okay, we'll play a game, but the Belfast Arena is the best arena in the country, in my opinion. You've got two arenas in Sheffield. You've got Nottingham as well. It's just Belfast has direct flights to the US, whereas Nottingham and Sheffield don't. It's just simple logistics. I love the NFL. Wish the Goodell stopped sending crap teams over here and get some quality size. Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars have got a contractual agreement to play X amount of games per season in London, while Saheed Khan still owns the team. Uh, Initially, the NFL did actually have a plan on the table to have a London team. I've discussed that at length as well. That window has passed, long past. I honestly believe, although they may try and resurrect that in the future. We'll see what happens with having a London-based team, but the NFLPA and the NFL owners would all have to have two-thirds majority vote in favour for that to take place, minimum. Um, and the economics have changed since that plan was drawn up in the mid 2000s. Yeah, steroids actually assisted the batters rather than the pitchers, whereas the sign stealing obviously benefits the pitchers over the batters. So it's about balancing um, the pitcher and the batter. Cricket, we've had similar scandals, but no, the way they handled that was so poor, though. We can disagree on the opinion, but the steroid scandal was more for batters hitting home runs rather than pitchers getting batters out. Whereas this one was where how to set the field, how to catch the batter out, and yeah, they had set up cameras in the dressing rooms, in the dugouts, all sorts. But technically, both are against the rules, and that's two major scandals of technically cheating, league-wide cheating, in my opinion, because other teams have been doing it. If the Boston Red Sox got caught and they're a successful team, yeah, um, yeah, it does. There's question marks about cricketers now getting a bit bigger and bulkier, batters and bowlers, fast bowlers especially. Um, they can bowl for longer spells now than they used to. Watch cricket, watch a fast bowler bowl 30, 40 overs in a test match in a row, which is just what didn't happen 20 years ago. You'd do 15, maybe 20 overs and then stop. Some of these bowlers now are going in for 30, 40 over stints, maybe a whole session, which is several hours bowling overs. So steroids could actually help a pitcher as well, get more speed, more power behind. Uh, Size stealing was illegal at the time. It's they just got away with it for so long. They must have been doing it for a lot longer than just a couple of seasons. I think it's a bit more widespread within the league than the league realizes. Um, I'm not naive to think that other teams weren't doing it, other than the two that were caught. But I do think it's a bit more widespread than at the time than we are led to believe. I think more might come out when ex-players say, "Look, this was going on." But the way the NFL, the Major League Baseball's dealt with those two cheating scandals, and I will call them cheating scandals, over the last 30 years have been shambolic, and it's damaged the league really badly. And it was sort of a badly kept secret that the steroids were there. Initially, fans were like, "Oh wow, this is amazing! We've got these super fit athletes who can hit the ball into the bleachers, second, third tier." Now it's, "Oh, well, they're all doing it. Oh, it's not so amazing anymore. This is a bit ridiculous." And there have been question marks about cricket as well, with some of the batsmen managing to get the ball out the ground on regular. Um, I know it was illegal at the time. It still is cheating. It's always been cheating. It's in the rule book. It's an unfair advantage. But no, steroids does also affect how the game is played as well. So both were illegal. Both affect how the game is played because you can improve your aerobic respiration. You can do more physical activity. You recover quicker from injuries. Um, you recover quicker from training sessions with steroids and other doping tactics and supplements that are illegal. Um, so yeah, no, steroids does. Do I think Man City will win the Champions League? That'll be interesting. They've failed thus far with all the money they've spent. Same with PSG. Both have only appeared in one final each with all the money they've spent over the last decade or so. So money doesn't always buy you the success you crave. We'll see what happens with Man City. Uh, Occasionally in cup games they've gone missing. They've been done tactically. Whereas the league season is different. A cup competition is completely different to a league season. So knockout football, Man City, apart from the League Cup, haven't got a great history. Just putting it out there. They do tend to get done tactically in big games. So yeah, a league season is consistency, but one-off games or home and away games, that one-off tie, Man City have got some problems there, and they are sloppy defensively. So the best defenses tend to win big competitions. That's an interesting question, but they spent all this money and they still haven't achieved. So you've got to build a culture, you've got to build a philosophy. You have to get the right pieces in place. League form is completely different to cup form. Cup competitions, your form goes out the window, in my opinion. It's there, but a team can just be motivated because they know if they lose, they're out. Whereas in the league, you can lose a game, not worry about it, and pick up points in the next game, and just be consistent in not dropping points and just be consistent. peak at the right time. Whereas in a knockout situation, you lose everything. You don't make it to the next stage. I think that's something about the psyche of the team and the history of the team. They've not got a great history in cup competitions as a whole over their entire history, let alone with money League Cup notwithstanding. So until they get their first European trophy of any kind, yeah, I think Juventus can do it. The the Italian league is a lot more competitive now. I will say that than what it was over the last decade. Um, they've made some squad changes. I will admit that. I haven't been following Serie A for a few years now, um, and I haven't seen Juventus play in the last decade really. So it's a difficult one. But again, they've not achieved what they should have with the success they've had domestically in Italian football over their entire history. Their European success is lacking, and again, it comes down to league play is different to cup play. There's a different dynamic to it, and that bears out in the results. Some teams like AC Milan are a very good cup side historically, um, with all those Champions League titles. So it is a completely different dynamic. Difference between league regular season, league play, and the cup competitions it completely is different because you don't have that buffer of having a next game where you can bounce back. When you're out, you're out. You know, it's winner takes all, be it one or two legs. You know, you 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 lose that game or that tie and you're out. Um, Amir Khan, Kell Brook. Amir Khan, I think, is past his prime, and I think Kell Brook is past his prime. So it's just two fighters in the second half of their careers going head to head. Um, Again, boxing's one of those sports that I've tuned out of in recent years. There's a lot of issues with the sport. There's but Amir Khan is past his best, and Kell Brook is past his best. So there you go. I think Bayern Munich is more likely to win um, out of those four clubs. If they were the four clubs to make the semi-finals, I would go Bayern Munich. Darts, darts is not hasn't got the appeal it used to have for me. I've got friends who play darts. Got a friend who plays in the BDO as a semi-pro. He's in the rankings. Darts again has lost its appeal. I used to watch it a lot when I was younger. I used to play a bit when I was younger, but I've lost my appeal on it. It's one of those uh, things where yeah, Britain's most talented ever sportsman. Well, that's an interesting one. It's a very difficult one. We've had some great individual talents in a variety of sports, be it motorsport, boxing, football, rugby league, cricket. Um, that's a difficult one. So Chris Hoy on the velodrome in indoor cycling, and now in motorsport because he does. You know, he's transitioned from cycling to rallying and GT racing. Chris Hoy is quite a talented, multi-talented sportsman. You've You've got quite a few. That's a difficult one. Adam Peaty as a swimmer, Rebecca Addington as a swimmer. Um, I think Jason Robinson in both rugby league and rugby union. So technically, I would class them as two separate sports. You could say. Of course, you've had like Joe Calzaghe, never beaten in the boxing ring. Ricky Hatton was a world champion. You've had Frank Bruno. You know, you've had Prince Nassim, you've had Amir Khan, obviously at the Olympics. You've had Audley Harrison, Lennox Lewis. Technically, he was Canadian, but represented us. Um, you've had Barry McGuigan as a boxer. You've had people can question Lewis Hamilton and bits and pieces, and whether you like or hate him, you have to look at his record in motorsport. A multitude of world rally championship rally drivers like Colin McRae and Richard Burns. Obviously, both have now since passed away. Um, it's a difficult one. Very difficult one. Jason Robinson, well, he played both codes, whereas Wilson only played Union. Although Jason Robinson had a shorter Union career and a shorter league career, if you combine his two careers together. Played, I think Jason Robinson, Billy Wiz, as his nickname was, definitely a very talented individual. But then you've got Martin Chariots of Fire for Wigan as well. Adrian Morley, the first in the NRL era. Most appearances in first grade. Beats Cam Smith. He's played more games than Cam Smith as a professional, including all his Great Britain and England appearances. Um, Liverpool and Chelsea would have a very good title race if Man City didn't exist. There's nothing to say that Man City is still going to be dominant in a couple of years' time. We'll have to see what happens with Guardiola, whether he extends or his contract or decides to move on when his contract's up. Um, and we don't know what's going to happen next season yet, and we don't know what's going to happen in the FA Cup and the Champions League yet. Man City might come away with just the one trophy this season. Liverpool might have a chance to win three trophies this season. So it's one of them. So that one is a difficult one. Oh, bloody annoying hair or two. That's an interesting question, though. I would say Chelsea have been the most have won the most trophies in the last 15 so years. They're so consistent; they will still win silverware. Um, Man City take their League Cups away; they haven't won that much. Few league titles here, but you take their League Cups away, their trophy cabinet's actually looking a little bit bare. Haven't dominated the FA Cup like they should have. Haven't won the Champions League yet, whereas Chelsea and Liverpool have. Um, So yeah, you have to bear that in mind. The other trophies that the teams have won. Um, Leicester winning the Charity Shield. Um, you know, this season, Premier League and FA Cup in there with a far smaller budget. It's a difficult one. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think Man City just have that little bit more squad depth for regular season, but again, cup competitions, their record outside the League Cup isn't great. You take the League Cups, the six League Cups they've had away, and Man City look very average when it comes to their trophy cabinet in comparison to your Chelsea's and Liverpool. To be fair, haven't got a lot of trophies in there either, really, until Klopp came along. So you take you know um, each era as it is. I think neither Man City or Liverpool or Chelsea are on the same level as the treble winning United side under Ferguson, the dominance that Ferguson's team has had in the first half of the Premier League era, and Arsenal under Wenger in the first half of Wenger's managerial time at Arsenal. Um, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City aren't on that level. Chelsea have been so consistent since the Abramovich era, but they were winning trophies before Abramovich came along. So the occasional trophy here or there. It's that one is an interesting question. Am I a golf fan? Again, I used to work at a golf club, so I should say yes. I used to be, but again, I've fallen out of love with golf. There's a lot of issues with golf, uh, and individual golfers get paid a lot with their sponsorships and prize money. It's not evenly distributed. Um, the TV deal they have, it's dwindling viewership, dwindling fandom. It's seen as a very elitist sport. So you already, you know, lose the working class fan from it. And the PGA and the European PGA and the American PGA tours are having a battle with this Saudi, idea to have a premiership of golf. Um, Thoughts on people changing or supporting more than one team? Well, I follow um, uh, several teams in several sports. Rugby league, I have two teams I follow: the Canberra Raiders in the NRL and the London Broncos in the Super League structure, currently in the Championship. Football, it's always been Blackburn, it always will be. Rugby union, I don't really have a team I follow in rugby union, although I have a soft spot for Exeter, I have a soft spot for Harlequins, and I have a soft spot for London Irish. Uh, Obviously, Medeski with Norwich used to play their home games is just down the road. Harlequins, my dad's team, and Exeter because they were the underdogs when they came into the Premiership, and they have a good business model and they play an attractive style. So um, I don't have a rugby union team that I follow. I like to see how teams are doing. Um, um, so there is that. These Olympic Games, I haven't watched any of them. I'm not watching the ice hockey because the NHL players aren't there. That's the only reason why I watch the ice hockey tournament is to see the best players play. That's why I enjoy the World Championships because there are NHL talent available for those World Championships. Um, to be brutally honest, I didn't watch the Summer Olympics in Tokyo, and I'm not watching the Winter Olympics. The lack of fans and the amount of issues with athletes doping all the time and cheating scandals, and it's become so political. Sod the corruption. It's become so political. I'm just not. It just tunes me out. Why is there a lack of top British coaches, managers in most sports? We seem to rely on foreign coaches. Um, well, rugby union, rugby league, and football are global games. The best coaches in rugby union and rugby league are Australian or from New Zealand. It's a fact. Even South Africa, it's just a fact. The footballing side of things is the global game. It is the global game. The amount of overseas money in the sport is there for all to see. The lower levels, there's a lot of English or British coaches, but it's pretty striking that an English manager, I'm going to say this, English manager has never won the Premier League. Never won the Premier League. An English manager has never won the Premier League. Um, Alex Ferguson, Scottish. Dalglish, Scottish. Wenger, French. Mourinho, Portuguese. Guardiola, Spanish. Catalan. Klopp, German. An English manager has never won the English Premier League. Let that sink in. Brendan Rodgers, FA Cup, he's Northern Ireland. Ranieri, Italian. I think Ancelotti won the Premier League. We've had an English manager has never won the Premier League. The old Division One, yes. Premier League, no. So that sums up your problem. Sums up your problem. I think the last English manager to win was Brian Clough in the old Division One. I think. I could be wrong there. So there's that. The GB hockey, yeah, the Great Britain hockey has a British coach, but there's some Canadian and American coaches coaching in the elite league and in the national league as well. So yeah, again, you have to sort of take that with a pinch of salt. And some of his backroom staff are not British either. Um, Russian ice skater positive for doping still? Yeah, it's a farce. It is. We've already discussed that. It's athlete welfare. She's a teenager. She's a kid. She's a kid. She should be at school. So there's question marks now of the minimum age you have to be before you're allowed to compete. I think that has to be raised um, because she's clearly her coaches and her support staff are the ones who put her in that position. It's not her choosing to cheat; it's her coaches. So ban the coaches. Um, Opinion on Lance Armstrong? Yeah, we do know Floyd Landis was his teammate. Who was his teammate? One of his teammates did a question and answer session at a university a couple of years back. They were doping as well. Marco Pantini, the pirate, famously, one of his major rivals in the late '90s, won the Tour de France once. Died of a drugs overdose, actually. The doping was endemic. It wasn't just Lance Armstrong. Um, the interesting thing is, since he went on the Oprah show all those years ago, and he admitted cheating, um, and he admitted cheating and said, "Yeah, you cheated." He was asked the question. I've seen a lot of interviews with Lance Armstrong. A lot. I've seen the whole Oprah Winfrey interview. It's about 4 hours long, the full unedited version. I've seen more recent interviews done in the last couple of years with Lance Armstrong, and every interviewer has asked him this question: if you were going from amateur to pro cycling today, would you do what you did? And he goes, no. The reason why he did what he did is the culture at the time, it was insidious. And it had been insidious for years before. Years. So no, he was not the only one. He was just the most efficient. His team and he himself were the most efficient at doing it. Um, and make of that what you will. He's yeah, make of that what you will. A lot of his ex teammates, Hinkape, that's Hinkape was his teammate. Being interviewed, he was like, "Yeah, no, this is wrong. I'm not doing this anymore." And they were the ones who eventually threw him under the bus. After he threw them under the bus, they came out and gave their evidence, and that's what did him. Uh, the Chinese ice hockey team is mostly Americans and Canadians. Yes, there are lots of expats who have tenuous links to China or whatever. Again, it just shows how like you know flawed this whole concept is of this Olympics. But I'm not watching it. I've got no interest. I'm not even going to watch the men's or women's Olympic ice hockey finals. And this is a shame because I love winter sports. Um, I grew up watching the Albertville and Lillehammer Olympic Games in the early '90s. That's the first Olympics I remember. Um, and so um, you know, it does make a bit of a farce of it. But I didn't watch the Summer Olympics either, so make of that what you will. And the viewership figures did tell out it was the viewership figures of the Summer Olympics in Tokyo were lower than anticipated, and I'm not sure what the viewership figures for this Olympics are going to be. Would I have an issue with someone supporting an Italian or Spanish team from England? No, no, not at all. Um, not in the slightest. I would have no issue with anyone supporting if you want to support who you want to support. It's fine. I know a lot of people who aren't even football fans who are just rugby or just rugby league or don't have an interest in sport. Um, so for me, not a problem. UFC or Bellator, I prefer Bellator over UFC when it comes to mixed martial arts MMA. But I'm not a massive fan, if I'm brutally honest. I'm not a fan of how um, Dana White and the UFC run things. And when you likes of like people like Conor McGregor and others, there are other UFC fighters who've got lots of legal issues. Um, it does it does damage your brand when you're trying to obviously certain jurisdictions don't allow it. Do I think people have lost interest? I watched the last Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, and I was not overly impressed with what I saw. But then you go back to the 2012 Olympics, I was invested in that. I loved that. But when we had the Olympics in Rio, there were so many issues with that Rio Olympic Games um, that that's when I started to fall out of love with the Olympics as a sporting. Every 2 years you've got summer, winter, summer, winter. That's when I started to fall out of love with the Olympic movement. Um, the issues with the Rio Olympics were just shocking. The waste of money. Um, the but I remember like the Beijing Olympics. The Vancouver Winter Olympics was one of my favourites. I have to admit, I did stay up to watch the men's ice hockey final with my cousin and my granddad at the time. And I'm the only I'm the only ice hockey fan in my family. I'm, and so that was the first time either of them had actually watched an ice hockey match. Ironically enough, that was the first time either of them had actually watched a full with overtime ice hockey match. Of course, Olympic rules are different to league rules. Fighting is not really it's frowned upon. You'll get a lengthy ban if you fight. Um, but it was the first time they had actually watched, ice hockey, and they were glued to the TV, absolutely glued to it. And it's the showcase event for the Winter Olympics is the ice hockey, and they were glued. They stayed up with me to watch. and I think the same day was the Super Bowl. I think, or the week before. Might have been the week before. Was it the same day? I think it was the same day the Super Bowl was on. So I went straight from the ice hockey final straight into the Super Bowl. I did not sleep for 2 days, and yeah, that was brutal, absolutely brutal. And of course, I was doing a mechanics qualification at a college of further education, like community. You class it as community college in the US. Obviously we're mid-term, so I had no college the next day. So I literally stayed up for 2 days and watched the Winter Olympic ice hockey final and the Super Bowl, and I was like this. I was like that. I was exhausted. But yeah, no, what does the Wild need to trade for the deadline? The Minnesota Wild have a pretty. They're going to make the playoffs. The issue with the Wild is getting to the second round, getting to the conference final. They're one of those teams like Toronto that just doesn't progress, and so you might want to have that veteran present. Dan, that isn't the real Sean Avery, by the way. It's a parody account. Just going to put it out there. He is a Canucks fan. Just saying, it's not Sean Avery. Trust me. A lot of people thought it was the real Sean Avery once. So I'm just going to put that out there. It's not Sean Avery. He's not a moderator. I don't like Sean Avery. Trust me, if it was the real Sean Avery, he would not be on this channel. It's a parody account. Um, Crikey, the abuse that me and Sean Avery would give each other would be hilarious. We'd be chirping for hours and hours. Quite literally, it would be X-rated viewing if it was the real Sean Avery. I'm probably one of the few British YouTubers who actually knows who Sean Avery actually is when it comes to sport. It's yeah. Well, parody can get you banned now. So alias, I like that. I like that. You're not a parody account. You're an alias. I do like that. Yes, yes. If it was the real Sean Avery, like, um, it would be very interesting. But no, I think the Minnesota Wild they need to get maybe I'm going to say one or two uh, defensemen and maybe a third, fourth line player, veteran, free agent, rental, just to get him over the line. They've got the talent, Kaprizov and co. They've got the young talent. Bill Guerin is the GM. He's doing a good job turning that team around. As a Jets fan, we're having a shocking season. The last month and a half has been disastrous. We've gone from fighting for first in division to sixth. So, and we lost to the Blackhawks last night, and that's just not good enough. We lost 3-1 to the Blackhawks, so I'm pissed. Um, so yeah, that's my views on things. But I think the Wild are in a good, strong position, but they need to add a couple of pieces. They need to get over that hump. They haven't been able to do it. They haven't been consistent enough in the playoffs either. Sean Avery is definitely a character. I don't want to meet him in real life outside getting my Avery jersey signed. Wouldn't even give him. I'd give a homeless guy $5 that Paul Bissonnette gave him to do so. Oh, that's brilliant. I Sean Avery definitely. Yeah, he basically himself got himself kicked out of the league for his antics and some of his comments, and a lot of people didn't want to play with him. You can have you can play with people you don't like, but when your teammates, you don't always have to get on with your teammate. But when they don't want to work with you, that tells you there's a big problem there. His comments about Dion Phaneuf's now wife and some other players' wives and girlfriends are really just disgusting. Um, some of his antics on the ice as well. There's a rule because obviously goalie interference. Um, uh, there's the Sean Avery rule that was brought in because of his antics, but he wasn't well. He's not well liked within the sport. I understand what he's done for minority rights. Yeah, as a civil rights activist, especially in the LGBTQ community. I have to give him credit for that. I do have to give him credit for that. But overall, he's not overly liked within the hockey community. He's a very divisive figure. But you get that in all sports. You're going to get those characters who aren't necessarily the most popular. But he got himself back. He basically retired himself from the league, and the European leagues didn't want him either. So that tells you all you need to know about Sean Avery. He wasn't even wanted in the European leagues. Yes, the Rangers are doing very well this season. A lot better than I anticipated. They've really turned a corner. Their rebuild's been very, very quick, very well done. The way they handled the coaching changes and the GM changes and the front office changes last season left me scratching my head a little bit, but it seems to have worked. The young guys and experienced guys are gelling well as a team. Good young goaltenders. They're going to be competitive for a decade at least. They're going to be contending for a decade at least. They're ahead of schedule as well with their plan to rebuild and retool, get back to the playoffs. They are ahead of schedule, which can be a bit concerning. You don't want this group to peak too soon. You want to build consistency. So the only fear I have with um, the Rangers is they might overachieve and then they come back to earth. But I'm liking the direction the Rangers are taking. Hockey players in general are weird. They have many Italian Brown toxic NBA age players in the league with their first changes at random. So, yeah, there are a lot of divisive figures. Mike Ribeiro was another one, who basically his antics, off ice antics, basically he's out the league now. Slava Voyanov beat his wife out the league. Beat domestically violent, battered his wife, battered his way out the league. Rafi Torres suspended himself out the league. Brad Marchand is another one, who you know it's one of them. Every goaltender's a bit mental. You get it. You get it in European football as well. A lot of disruptive. Everyone loves Torts. I love Torts. Um, he's an impact coach. You don't want Tortorella to coach a team for more than about 4 seasons. After that, it wears off. But he does get a response from his players. The only time it didn't work was at Vancouver. Um, Good luck. I hope you enjoy it. I do hope you enjoy it. The Link Centre is aging a bit, but the team are quite good, so it makes up for the weird seating arrangement in the Link Centre. It's like a three-sided arena with one side that's the scoreboard. Would I consider Lafreniere for JT Miller as a fair trade? What he's projected to develop to? I don't ever call a player a bust unless it's like a Niall Yakupov type character. In my regard, if you make it to the NHL, you are in the top 2% of players ever. To play one game or 1,000, you are in a very elite group. To even get drafted or considered for the draft, you are an elite player. The obsession, however, with the NHL not to consider statistics of the other leagues and what players have achieved in other leagues boggles my mind. I find that ridiculous. They only focus on the NHL records. Lafreniere, though, he is predicted to really, you know, get better, but he's playing on a good team, so he doesn't have to be the guy. When you're playing on a good team as a young player developing, you you you, you can it can mask some of your deficiencies. When he first came into the league, the Rangers weren't a playoff team. They were middling in the pack, and his deficiencies were exposed. But confidence as well. Winning breeds confidence and positivity. And yeah, he could be, the next Sidney Crosby. Some players develop at different paces to others, and JT Miller's a solid player as well. So, looking at that, I can see Lafreniere doing quite well. Quite well. He might have a breakout 50 goals and gets 90 to 110 points, and suddenly the conversations change from, oh, he's going to be a good player to he's a superstar. But they put a lot of pressure on these young players at the draft and in their rookie seasons. A lot of pressure, and Not every player is going to be a Wayne Gretzky or a Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr type player for what they've done in the sport. To compare some of these young up and coming talents with those legends, and Jager's 50 and he's still playing. He doesn't want to retire. That's ridiculous. Jager could play till his mid 50s, and I know he's playing in the Czech league. And the Czech league's not that different. It's a different style of hockey. He's still playing at elite level at the age of 50 in the modern era. Gordie Howe was playing at a time when the pace of the game was slower. Um, the style of play was different. For me, Jaromir Jagr is the greatest of all time. Of all time. Just imagine if he'd stayed in the NHL his entire career. He'd be mad, wouldn't he? Youth level to senior level is a big step up as well. When you're playing in the minors or you're getting protected minutes in minor leagues or in different leagues, different style of play, different size ice surface, um, different physicality to the game. The continentals, like the Scandinavian game, is a bit less physical. The German and British leagues are a bit more physical, so they're a different style as well. So Lafreniere obviously is a bit different to Capo Caco because he has come through the North American junior leagues. Caco's obviously come through the European system where he has played against men. But they're playing on a good team, so their weaknesses are covered by the fact that the team are winning. And in a good league position. But when they first came into the league, the Rangers weren't obviously a playoff team. They were, as I say, mid-table. If you look at the overall standings, um, so I think two-way forward. I think Kako. He's got to adapt his game to the NHL style. Lafreniere, again, a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure put upon these two lads, very, very young. And this is what I don't like about the North American fan base and media is if you're drafted in the first round, if you play in your rookie season, the season you're drafted, a lot of pressure. And if you're playing, let's say, the season after, again, a lot of pressure. And late round draft picks, late draft picks can sometimes be the better player. Pavel Datsyuk, for example, tells you all you need to know. Players develop at different rates, they peak at different times, and then, you know, they their junior level is different to senior level. It doesn't matter what league you're playing in, and so and again, it's the systems that the Rangers are employing. They've had coaching changes, GM changes. There's been a lot of overhaul with the Rangers. Different voice behind the bench, different style of play. Uh, Different coaches will expect different things. Um, and you've got to play a 200-foot game. You can't just be a sniper. You can't just be a defender's defenseman anymore. You've got to be able to go the whole length of the ice. So um, you've obviously the role that they've been given. Obviously, what you see in juniors or in before you're drafted. Let's say you're playing in the European leagues where you're getting protected minutes and the game is different. Um, and the ice surface is a different size. It Some of these European players are superstars in their own leagues. They're household names in Scandinavia and Russia and stuff, and it doesn't translate. Whereas some of these NHL players, they go over to Europe and they again doesn't translate because the ice surface is different, the style of play is different, um, the way the refs call the game is different, the way they're coached is different, the emphasis on different skill sets. So you have to wonder, how he's got to adapt his game. He could be like a Patrice Bergeron type player where he just becomes a two-way forward, and that is what he becomes. And he's a solid NHL two-way forward. Um, it happens. He might, you know, suddenly have a breakout season in his when he's 23, 24. Yeah. The pressure put upon young players straight out of the gate is ridiculous. And for whatever reason, if they're drafted first, second, or third overall, they're compared to the Sedin twins. They're compared to Lemieux, Gretzky. You know, they're compared to not Chris Pronger. Who was the other one? Legion of Doom. Oates, Corey Oates, Brett Hull. You know, they are compared to some of these guys who were playing at the time when scoring was you know um, just going in all the time. The average goals per game is less now than what it was 30 years ago. We have goal scoring is up on the dead puck era, but it's still below peak late 80s, early 90s. So the game has evolved. Um, you know, McDavid and Drysaitel. Drysaitel for me is the better player. Oop, unpopular decision. Mic drop. Um, you will have to follow me on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram. It's just the Sports Buffy. I don't really post much on Instagram. The only things I post on Twitter are my YouTube videos when I share them. So I don't share on my Facebook. Well, I do actually. I share my videos on Facebook, but my Facebook is just my sense of humor. I don't post personal stuff on Facebook. I post the occasional post on Instagram. Haven't posted for a while. I'm more a YouTube kind of guy. It's where most of my social media content goes. If I'm brutally honest, I don't post a lot on Instagram. I don't post a lot on Twitter. YouTube is where my content goes up. I'm tempted to get a podcast going on Podbean, but you've got to pay for the servers, and so that's a topic for another day. The channel would obviously have to massively increase in exposure to warrant doing that, make money. But we've seen a fair bit of growth in the last couple of weeks, which is positive to see. We're pushing 870 subs. I think we're a few subs short of that. So if you've got any friends who are interested in a variety of sports, just tell them to give the channel a look. I mean, obviously, I have my opinions on certain things. Looking at the Reading Rockets applying to join the British Basketball League, that's a positive sign for the sport in getting another team at the top level. But the, the Thames Valley Tigers going out of business all those years ago, I think, has cost the Thames Valley a team for a long time. But yeah, no, there's you can follow on Instagram if you want. There's not a lot I put up on there really, so I don't really. I'm thinking about getting rid of my Instagram, to be brutally honest. I don't post it. I haven't posted on Instagram for what, 5 months, something like that. 4 or 5 months since I've posted anything on Instagram. So have fun with that. I should possibly post something on Instagram. I think. But no, the I've got my Facebook, which is my personal Facebook. British Basketball League has 10 teams. So it's a positive. It's positive intent that the league has to expand to 16. It's whether the quality can back up the expansion. And of course, it needs investment. And economically, right now, there's not a lot of money floating around the economy right now. So it's a brave decision in tough economic times to want to have that ambition to grow to 16 teams when there's already not a lot of money in the sport. It's a very ambitious goal considering the economics. Um, if COVID hadn't have happened, then there was enough money floating around the economy to possibly do that. So this is where economics and sport kind of meet in the middle. There's nothing. It's an admirable goal to want to grow the sport and increase the player base and obviously increase the fan base and increase the revenue streams. But it's got to be sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, then teams are going to financially struggle. And when teams financially struggle, then the league itself, it will hurt the league itself. So it's got to be sustainable and it's got to be realistic. So yes, Reading, putting forward a application to join is a positive, absolutely. But there has to be, economic prudence there. Yes, there is a lack of indoor arena space. We've discussed that before on the channel, the lack of facilities available. Yet the netball league is doing, going from strength to strength. Um, so, yeah, but there is that ongoing issue with indoor arena facilities in the UK. But as you know, most of our sports are outdoor sporting, you know, um, culture. It's just how our sports have developed, and what is popular with sports fans and those who participate. So there is that as well as the cultural thing. Um, it's just how, yeah, our professional sports have developed in the modern era since Second World War. And that's what I call the modern sporting era. Really, is where professionalism really is, taken off. Wages are there, TV deals, media rights. So, but especially the last 30 years, that's what I call the present kind of modern sporting era. And so yes, so obviously there is the issue with available arenas, and obviously then you have to rent the space, you have to pay a lease to the arena operators, and several arena operators since COVID hit have hit financial difficulty, and we've seen it with the Bracknell Ice Rink, we've seen it with the arena in Glasgow, where the Glasgow Clan play. Their parent company's gone into administration, Basingstoke. Um, what influence did my mum have? Not a lot, actually. It was more my dad. It was more my dad, and both my granddads were my influence on sport. My dad's dad was a long distance runner and also played field hockey for England. My dad played non-league football for Dorchester Town and then played football and rugby for the army. My other granddad played a little bit of time at Stevenage Borough and was a marathon runner. So that's where my kind of enjoyment of sport came from. Yeah, and I think some of my friends' families also sort of helped me a little bit as well. Some of my friends and then their parents were also equally encouraging. But my mum didn't have much influence, apart from she let me watch the sport on the telly. When the weather was crap and I couldn't play outside with my mates, I would happily sit in front of the TV for 17, 18 hours a day. My sister used to had more friends than me, and she was a bit older, and she used to go around her friend's house a lot and all that. And my sister wasn't very sporty, so she had no real interest. Really, she was more into her music and art, and I was more into my sport and film and films and books. So I would happily sit on the TV for. I think one day there was one day I remember this clear as day. A friend of my mum's used to have a motorcycle, superbikes, and I'm big into my superbikes. And the only sport my mum used to watch with me really would be the superbikes because she actually likes motorsport, ironically. And the Olympics, Winter Olympics, because my mum we used to be a very avid skier when she was younger. So the Winter Olympics and the ski events on Ski Sunday, which is a program we have over here in the UK when the Winter Olympic sports are on and all that. And so we were, but for me, no, my mum had a limited influence. But there was one day one of my mum's friends came over with a motorbike, and obviously, we have things like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. I'm dropping some channel names here. Got to be careful. And all the kids' cartoons and the teenagers' cartoons and all that. And she comes over and she puts the TV over onto the Cartoon Network. Um, and I quickly changed the channel, put the sport back on. And my mum's friend was like, "Don't you want to watch cartoons?" And I was like, "No, no." And I just happily watched the sports networks all day. And my mum said to her, like, "No, don't touch the TV. He'll be quiet all day." fine. He'll only come to the kitchen if he wants a sandwich or a bottle of Coke. That was it. That was it. My mum was like, "Let him have the TV, please. He'll be quiet." Um, yeah, during the draft, NFL players seem to be closer to their mums than their dads. I obviously the only draft I follow is the NHL draft, and it does seem that it generally is the mums who when they're growing up and they're going to their junior like games, take them to practice, take them to training camps. There's a lot of sacrifices that parents make in a lot of sports, and I never obviously. Um, I played sport at school, but I didn't obviously play sport. I didn't get scouted by any teams like some of my mates did. So there's a lot of sacrifices parents make, and they have to sacrifice a lot. Um, so and not every parent can do that. That's why a lot of kids drop out of sporting activities because their parents either can't afford to or don't want to make that sacrifice. So yes, I have seen a lot of especially in the NHL draft, when they fly their parents out if they're overseas and all that. There seems to be a big connection with parents going to their first ever game and things like that. And there's a big effort with mum's night and dad's night in the NHL, where they had their dads in for one special night of the season, and then their mums another night of the season. They do a lot of appreciation nights at all the 32 arenas. Um, so there is a lot of sacrifices, and when I watch the NRL, especially, a lot of the players who get interviewed, I've seen a lot of interviews, will mention how their mum used to take the practice, might have taken 5 or 6 of the kids at the youth team to practice, and then cooked them all a barbecue or something. So there is definitely a lot of um, it does seem to be a lot of mums do sacrifice a lot for because obviously in some countries there's still a lot of stay at home mums culturally, and dad's going out to work. It's the mum who has to take care of the kids, take them to practice, pick them up from practice, buy their boots, buy their kits, do the washing, take them to the doctors when they've hurt themselves. Um, so there does seem to be a lot of that, you know. And when you hear award speeches when they go, "Oh, I thank my parents, especially my mum, for taking me to practice," you do hear it a lot. But I think slowly more and more dads are getting that recognition as well. So I have seen that a little bit. But it does seem that whenever I watch sports and they have like a man of the match performance or they reach a certain amount of appearances and they have a special, award ceremony, they do seem to go to their mums first before their dads. It does seem to be a thing. Don't know why that is. Um, my thoughts on speedway. I like watching speedway, but it's not my favourite form of motorsport. If you anything to do with motorcycles, it's either motocross or superbikes. For me, over anything else. Um, I like my stock car racing, like NASCAR. I like my touring cars. I like my GT endurance racing. I like my rallying as well. So speedway, I don't mind watching it, but I don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as motocross or superbikes. I prefer watching motocross and superbikes and more and supercross, the arena cross, a lot more. Um, it's just what it is. I even watch enduro bike racing as well, like their version of the Le Mans, the Suzuka 12 hour. That's brilliant to watch that when they're going around Suzuka at night and on the superbikes. Um, but don't get me wrong, it's motorsport and they crash a lot, so it is kind of fun. There is that element of, "Oh, is there an accident into that first corner on that first lap?" But for me, speedway is not as fun to watch as motocross or superbikes or TT racing, like road racing, or F NASCAR or touring cars or GT. I don't mind it, but it's not as interesting for me. I will watch it, but I'm not a massive fan. It was more popular in the UK in the 60s to the 80s than it is now. Speedway has declined in popularity in the last 20, 25 years in comparison to some other forms of motorsport, which have increased in popularity or stayed pretty stable with funding and sponsorships and TV deals. Speedway doesn't have a great TV deal in the UK. A lot of the Speedway tracks have gone. There's less money in the sport now than what there was before, and it appears to have dwindled in popularity. There's a hardcore fan base, but it's not as popular. It's very popular in Eastern Europe, though. Very popular in Poland. It's one of the national sports in Poland. It's very popular in Poland. It's very popular in Eastern Europe. Um, but it is weird. Yes, there used to be a speedway in Reading as well, and it's gone. There was also a motocross track in Reading as well, which shut down about 2006 after a fatal accident there. But yeah, no, I do remember the Speedway Stadium in Swindon. Been there once or twice. I remember the Speedway Stadium in Reading as well. But yeah, gone. But again, it's the running costs of the facility, safety standards of the facilities have to improve, and facility owners may not have that kind of money to pump into the facility. And the running costs of running a motorsport team as well are actually ridiculously high. Um, and yeah, if you're not making money, same with dog tracks were also used as speedway, dog tracks and speedway sort of used facilities, and there's less dog tracks now than there used to be as well. So two sporting pastimes that are declining in popularity in recent years, and the old dog tracks, which were also speedway tracks, are just not there anymore. Um, and yeah, facility upkeep and all that, and running a motorsport team is expensive. Um, but yeah, the old dog tracks, there's less of them around, and they used to double up the speedway circuits, and when the dog track, which is the primary income, struggling. Yeah. Ford versus. I've seen snippets of Ford versus Ferrari, and I've seen the documentaries about it, and the history of Le Mans, and everything like that, and the big accident. There was a big accident at Le Mans with a Mercedes that crashed into a grandstand and killed a lot of people, and they changed a lot of grandstand safety standards after it. Um, uh, I prefer the older Le Mans. I don't like the hypercar prototype classes. I like the old I just prefer the GT classes, really. And I prefer if it was all just a single GT class, where all the cars are pretty equal and it's just endurance racing. It's a pity that Morgan don't have a team anymore, because Morgan used to have a GT team. I love Morgans. I love the Aero 8. Oh, my favourite car is the Aero 8. I know it's bug-eyed and it looks like it's cross-eyed and boss-eyed, but I love the Aero 8. It shows what an Mercedes AMG engine is capable of when you take the restrictor off. Oh, it's a beautiful machine. Oh, I love the Morgan Aero 8. It's absolutely beautiful GT Grand Tourer. Oh, I would love to race one. And no, it's a shame that Morgan haven't actually got a GT car in any of the GT class fields, because that AMG engine completely de-restricted is just a beast to listen to. The 6-speed sequential. Oh, but there you go. I just, yeah, I'm salivating now over Morgans. If I had the money, I'd buy a Morgan Aero 8 right now. If I had my license, I would have a Morgan Aero 8 titanium. What's the limited edition? I'd have one. Thing is, there's a 2-year waiting list to get a Morgan. That's the pain in the ass about it. But I would have a Morgan Aero 8. Oh yeah, with the driving gloves. I actually know a guy who's got a couple of Morgans. They are just stunning cars. Proper old school, but Morgan Aero 8, favourite car. But yes, Ford versus Ferrari. If it wasn't for Carroll Shelby, the GT40 would not have been a thing. He Without Carroll Shelby, the original GT40 wouldn't have got off the ground. Um, and people forget the importance that Carroll Shelby had for not only the AC company, AC Cobra, which became the Shelby Cobra limited edition, and Ford. with the Mustangs and other Ford, you know, sports cars with the Shelby moniker on them. But without Carroll Shelby's involvement, we wouldn't have had the GT40, and it wouldn't have won Le Mans. Plain and simple. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, again, back in those days, motor racing was a far more dangerous occupation than it is now. Every season, every season, doesn't matter what class of car you're racing, be it Grand Prix or touring cars or rallying or GT endurance racing, NASCAR, deaths constantly. Safety has massively improved, and the technology has also helped with the safety. But some of the accidents were just horrific. And yeah, a lot of the drivers who retired afterwards, they were scarred mentally with the fact that their friends and rivals went up in a ball of flame, and were mangled in horrific accidents. Um, never it haunted a lot of them. A lot of them struggled with drink and drug problems as well. And if it wasn't for the likes of Jackie Stewart driving and Sterling Moss, and Graham Hill, for example, as well, he had a nasty accident where he broke both his legs and he was never the same again, driving wise. If it wasn't for those drivers, really going, we need to do something about the safety here, and standing up for driver safety. Nicky Lauda as well, and James Hunt, in the 70s, really going, this is getting ridiculous now. And Sterling Moss has some horrific accidents, and Graham Hill at Watkins Glen, when he gets thrown out the car, breaks both his legs, and was lucky to live. Yes, I do remember when Dale Earnhardt died because his son Dale Earnhardt Jr. was driving in the same race. He was the last death in NASCAR. Amazingly, there's been some. Was it Amarola a couple of years ago broke his back when his car caught fire and he got shunted about 2 years ago? That was, I think, and Ty Dillon getting flipped at Daytona and ending up in the catch fence. When he walked out of that, how he walked out of that, I have no idea. And you had Kyle Busch break one of his legs in an accident 25 years ago. They're dead. So the Dale Earnhardt's death definitely changed that form of motor racing. IndyCar, however, has still had fatalities until recently, with Justin Wilson and Wielden and all that, with some of their accidents, and Andretti and Zanetti and all that, losing both his legs, uh, and some massive shunts in. I don't like IndyCar. I don't like F1. Don't like IndyCar. But yeah, I remember when Dale Earnhardt Senior died. Yes, I do. Horrific accident. It was actually quite a minor accident, really, in the grand scheme of things. It was the fracture at the back of his head that actually killed him. But you also had broken ribs and a broken ankle from the shot going through the brake pedal up his leg, and then his body bouncing around like that. That's why they have the hands device and the inbuilt cockpit seats, which keep your head pretty stable with an accident. But yes, it did make news. That was the same year as 9/11. And my mum was spending a lot of time in America at the time, so definitely made news over here. But my mum was spending a lot of time in America with business at the time, with her working for Hewlett Packard and Agilent, which are two American companies that were part of the same group at the time in the technology industry. And obviously be on the phone and talking when she's in Colorado and all that, when she was in Colorado. And obviously she knows I'm a sports fanatic, and yeah, I remember it made news over here. Not as massive news, I would think. If it was to happen today, I think it would just be global mess, because deaths in motorsport are a lot rarer now than what they used to be. They still happen. Um, I think the worst one in Britain, there was a British superbike rider who died last summer at Brands Hatch, on the last corner, in front of the main grandstand. a horrible accident. There was what other one was there? There's been a few, but nowhere near as many as there used to be. It was almost on a daily basis in motorsport up until the mid 2000s that it was regular fatalities. Safety's massively improved, and because he's the last death in NASCAR, that is a milestone. And we've had some massive shunts. Joey Logano last season flipped his car completely. I remember one of the races completely rolled it multiple times, and bits of his car flew over another car, and the other car nearly hit him and all that. Eric Amarola broke his back a couple of years ago. Ty Dillon, I think 2015, ended up in the catch fence at Daytona. 190 odd mile an hour. So yeah, you've had Justin Wilson at Pocono. You've had I think it's Dan Wheeldon, another British driver, who died in a ball of flame. There's been a few in IndyCar. I remember that as well. It's a dangerous sport, is motorsport. Doesn't matter what formula, bikes or cars, trucks. We have truck racing as well. It is dangerous. I've seen some massive shunts where guys have walked away where 20 years ago they're dead. Um, Massive shunts. I mean, Fernando Alonso's had a few big ones in F1. Robert Kubica had a rally accident where he basically severed his right arm. They had to reattach it. You've had some massive shunts in F1 in my lifetime, post Senna and Ratzenberger dying at Imola in '94. Massive accidents. And watch him walk away, and you're just stunned. Roman Grosjean, when he caught fire and he died, burnt his hands and feet really badly. And if he'd been there another couple of seconds, he's dead. His car shit in half. You had the two GP2 drivers at Spa a couple of years ago, with the car split in half, multiple pile up. There was a GT race at Spa, same section, where car got hit multiple times. And I'm looking at some of these accidents, and they're walking away, or they're getting out in the ambulance and they recover. It's just, when I was a kid, that's a fatal. Now it's a bad injury, but they're okay. The German female driver at Macau, he just flipped into the barrier and broke her back as well. 15 years ago, she's dead. Sophia Flörsch, at Macau, at the Macau Grand Prix, in F4, and she came into the corner and her brakes failed, and she basically took off and ended up backwards and broke her back in like 3 places. She was racing again that season. It's ridiculous. Yeah, Dan Wheeldon, British driver, not well known over here, ironically. He spent most of his career in the US, but that was a horrific accident. Absolutely horrific accident. I know Sebastian Bourdais had a couple of big ones as well in IndyCar. Um, Absolutely massive accidents. I remember Mika Hakkinen breaking his back in '94 as well in the McLaren, and he struggled in the '95. Couldn't race all the '95 season. Jacques Villeneuve broke his back. Olivier Panis broke both his legs. There was a Jaguar driver before they became Red Bull at Spa who broke both his legs as well. Got trapped in the car. Michael Schumacher at Silverstone in '99 when he had the brake failure. At Stowe, straight off. I've seen some big ones. Felipe Massa with the bit of suspension hitting him in the head, nearly died. Had a press fracture of his skull. Yeah, I've seen some big ones. Gutierrez and Alonso was a massive accident. I remember a couple of years ago with the Sauber and the McLaren, 185 mile an hour. And Gutierrez was lucky to survive that because he got hit from behind, and he gets out and straight away he goes to check on Fernando Alonso and goes, "Oh shit, you okay?" Obviously they're talking in Spanish because Gutierrez is Mexican. That was a scary one. How Gutierrez just casually gets out of his car, sees the other car, goes straight over to it. There was one at Spa in the qualifying where one of the British drivers went off and badly, and Vettel was the first guy who stopped. Barrichello's had a couple of bad crashes. The one at Imola where he lands on the barrier and the car snaps in half, and all he did was break his nose and break a thumb. Should have broken his back. Should have broken his back, in my opinion. Martin Brundle had a couple at Melbourne in '96 when you were allowed to have the spare car. Johnny Herbert's car catching fire in the pit lane in the fuel stop, just a ball of flame. But the biggest one for me was the scariest one for me. I think was Jacques Villeneuve mount the barrier backwards, broke his back. Ralph Schumacher, Indianapolis when the tyre failed, hitting the wall at 185, broke his back. He was never the same driver again after that. He was constantly in pain after that. What other big ones have I seen? I've seen loads, loads of them. Loads. Raikkonen at Silverstone in the Ferrari. That was a massive accident. Walked away from that unharmed, which is ridiculous. Some bad rally ones. Gigi Garley, his co-driver, got a rock and a metal fence post went through his leg, and they carried on the stage with a metal rod through his leg. Jos Verstappen had a bad fire. He had a few bad crashes. Trying to think of some tour. There was it Steve Thompson? Thompson used to race for Vauxhall in the British Touring Car Championship at Owen Park. He ended up up a tree backwards in the wet. He just straight up, and the whole car concertina like that. The whole back end just gone. That was quite a horrific one. I remember when I was a kid. Some rally ones were mental. There was a few deaths at the Dakar Rally. Some bad rally ones that I've seen in the regional rally championships and the World Rally Championship over the years. Again, people walking away from them, and they had to change the rules. Group B rallying, the cars were too dangerous. They were actually killing the drivers. They were like, "Oh, we've got to stop doing this now." In the '80s, they were like, "Oh, we're having drivers die. We've got to stop doing this." So they changed the rules over rally cars in the '90s to make them safer. So Group B rallying, not a thing anymore. Those cars were dangerous. The Renault 5 and the Peugeot 205 killed drivers. Quite a bit. Yeah, they're just, again, safety has improved massively. I remember Carlos Sainz. When I was a kid, he rolled his Toyota Corolla a million times and completely destroyed the car. And how he walked away from that is ridiculous. Yeah, I've seen some big ones. I've seen some massive ones in my time. Coulthard at Spa causing that massive pile up in, I think it was '97 or '98. Wiped out half the field in one go. It was quite a bad one. I've seen some bad crashes at Monaco. I remember Perez at the Harbour chicane and Jenson Button at the Harbour chicane. They've had some big shunts down there coming out the tunnel. Massive shunts coming out the tunnel. They've had to change that chicane now, make more runoff. I remember Nick Heidfeld in Formula E in the first ever race going airborne. No, there's pro wrestling. Yeah, ironically, wrestling and boxing and MMA deaths are actually thankfully very very rare. In the ring or in the octagon, very rare. Very rarely happen. You're more likely to get killed or injured in training than actually in a match, which is thankfully very nice. It has happened, however. It's very rare, which is a good thing. But yeah, motorsport safety though has massively improved in my lifetime. I've got obviously, if you look at one of my previous live streams, I've got the Murray Walker book, and obviously that's up to 2003, and it discusses some of the horrific accidents in that. There's just like Ascari. He's got a chicane named after him at Monza for a reason. There was a guy who crashed in I forget who was it, Fangio or Ascari, who crashed in the Monaco harbour and died. There's just, the list goes on and on and on. So many fatalities at so many circuits. It's just Deaths in motorsport now are less common than what they used to be. They still happen, and when they do happen, it's more shocking because they're less common. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, in F1, rallying, superbikes, TT, well, TT, Ironman still kills people, so take that as you will, um, and road racing in general. But motorsport, in the last 25 years, basically since Senna's death and Dale Earnhardt's death, deaths in motorsport now are more shocking because they're so rare. Um, Up until the late 90s, early 2000s, it was a regular occurrence in every category of motorsport. It was regular, and it became a bit rarer. And then when Senna dies, and then Dale Earnhardt dies, they are the two turning points for safety, at least in cars, when it comes to motor racing, be it single seaters or fully enclosed, car racing. Motorcycles still deaths at a higher rate, but they are the two turning points in motorsport for me. Um, Motorcycle racing is still lethal, um, because you are the crumple zone. Um, Whereas in car racing, okay, they've made a lot of safety improvements with the Halo device or now the cockpit with IndyCar, the crumple zones and the crash structures with touring cars, GT cars, rally cars, roll cages, the hands device, the seats being safer, the bucket seats being safer, the race seats being safer, fans not allowed to be go so close in rallying, more runoff zones, safer barriers. Um, so they've made so many safety improvements, but deaths still happen, and um, you're never going to get rid of that risk um, from motorsport. It's just thankfully so rare now that it's now actually shocking. Whereas when I was a kid, it was still an everyday occurrence. It was the two greatest drivers of their era in their particular categories, Dale Earnhardt and Ayrton Senna, were the turning point because they were household names that had not only appeal with their own fan base, be it NASCAR or F1, but also were globally known and that's the difference. The V8 supercars in Australia, some massive shunts in that. Normally at Bathurst, um, massive shunts, especially on Mount Panorama section, on the mountain section, ridiculous. So yeah, but thankfully it's so rare now, which is so nice to see. But when it does happen, it makes it all the more shocking when a bad accident happens or bad injuries happen. I remember Surtees' son in Formula 4 killed with a tyre hitting him in the head. And this is before Jules Bianchi's accident at Suzuka. And again, they were going, we've got to have enclosed cockpits in open wheel racing. We've got to improve the safety. Nothing happened until Jules Bianchi and Justin Wilson with their nasty accidents. Dan Wilder, nothing happened. Um, they just changed some of what I call the road furniture, the crash barriers at the ovals. But Jules Bianchi, it didn't happen overnight. It took 2, 3 seasons before the Halo device came in. Um, Dale Earnhardt, it didn't happen overnight. The safety barriers were introduced, and then the hands device, and then the all-enclosed seats. It didn't happen overnight. It still took more fatalities and accidents of a serious nature that left serious injury to the driver for the safety to be improved. Um, so even now, motorsport is still a bit slow on the uptake of going, right, we have a problem. And they have the money in the motorsport world to make those improvements very quickly. And they still drag their feet because you need that risk there. I think more could be done on track design. I'm not a big fan of some of these barriers and removing gravel traps, especially at Spa and those high speed circuits, because you need deceleration before you hit the barrier. And with smooth tarmac, you don't decelerate if your brakes fail or if you're having a high speed accident. The gravel traps decelerate you massively before you actually hit the barrier. You decelerate quicker with friction. When you've got smooth tarmac, you don't decelerate. You just carry on. into the barrier at real high speed. But there we go. I'm going to call that a night because I've got to be up in 4 hours for work. Thank you very, very much for this evening's comments and questions. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the questions you put to me. Really enjoy it. And I will have some more videos for you very, 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 very soon. I hate both fan bases of Liverpool and Man United, by the way. But I'm going to call it a night. Thank you very much for your input tonight. Really appreciate it. And we'll have some more video content for you very, very soon. Bye for now.